final talk in this morning session. The final talk is given by Professor Toshio Yanagida from Osaka University. The title of talk is Single Molecule Study for Elucidating the Mechanism Involved in Utilizing Fluctuations by Biosystems. Please.
Thank you, Chairperson, for kind introduction. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to attend such an exciting meeting. The title of today's talk is like that. And previously, the IBM developed a supercomputer, Blue Gene, to play a chess game with the world champion Garry Kasparov. And this computer won this game. But this computer used huge energy. That is the 50,000 watts. On the other hand, the Kasparov probably used just only 1 watt, maybe less than 1 watt. So in general, the biological system uses very small amount of energy for their functions. The biological system is composed of various types of molecular machines. And the input energy level of these molecular machines is not far from thermal noise energy. The molecular machine can thus operate under very strong influence of thermal agitation with high efficiency of energy conversion. This is in sharp contrast in the man-made machine that operates at energy much higher than thermal energy. So this is a reason why the biological system can operate by using just a small energy. But when the input energy level is not far from thermal noise energy, molecular machine cannot avoid the effect of thermal fluctuation. Therefore, the apparent performance or function of the biological machine is much poorer than that of the man-made machine. For example, the operation time of the transistor is nanosecond. On the other hand, that of the biological molecular machine is just a millisecond, so million times slower. And the accuracy of the biological machine is terrible poor than that of the man-made machine. And the second example, the rate of the data transfer. Previously, Professor Shimozawa estimated the rate of the data transfer of neuron by using the sensory neuron of cricket by using this formula. And they found that the rate of data transfer is just 400 bits per second. But on the other hand, the optical guide operated by electric device is 1 gigabit per second. So also a million times poorer. One memory capacity. He's Kempi. He's a model of the very famous movie Layman. Do you know Layman? So he learns 7,600 books by rote. It's amazing. For us, it is difficult to learn only one sentence by rote, but he can learn 7,600 books by rote. Probably this is the maximum memory capacity of the human brain. But this memory size is correspond to 7.6 gigabytes. The memory size of the DVD disk, of which price is just 200 yen, $2, is 4.7 gigabytes. So memory size of our brain corresponds to just 2 pieces of DVD disk, which price is just 400 yen. So globally, the underlying principle of the biological machines should be different from that of man-made machine. So what is the difference between the man-made machine and biological machine? Maybe this answer is that of the what is life. But we have studied this question at the molecular machine level, cellular level, and human brain level. And first, I would like to talk about the study of the molecular machine level. To approach this problem, we have developed several new technologies. The single molecule nanotechnologies for single molecule imaging, single molecule trapping, single molecule imaging, chemical reaction, and single molecule nano manipulation. And first, I would like to introduce you these new technologies quite briefly. The first is a single molecule imaging. The biomolecule and even their assembly are nanometers in size. Therefore, it is impossible to directly observe them in aqueous solution. To overcome this problem, the biomolecule can be fluorescently labeled and visualized by fluorescence microscope. This is just like seeing stars at a great distance in the midnight. The key point to visualize single fluorophore in aqueous solution is how to detect the background noise. So we have used evanescent field produced when laser light totally reflected in the interface between glass and water. As you know, the penetration depth of the evanescent field is just 100 to 150 nanometers, so we can greatly reduce the background noise due to Raman scattering of water molecules, the dust, luminescence, and so on. And we, of course, have carefully care the other objects, and then finally we succeeded in reducing the background noise by more than 2,000-fold smaller than that of the conventional fluorescence microscope. And then thus we have succeeded in direct observation of single fluorophore in a solution. Thank you. So this shows the fluorescence image of the single fluorophore. White spot image of the single fluorophore. And the 1995, almost more than 10 years ago, we have succeeded with this experiment. And these people are main players of this experiment. Anyway, before this time, no one had succeeded in direct observation of single fluorophore in aqueous solution. And this technique can apply to various types of molecular dynamics. And today, I would like to introduce you some applications. The first is the kinesin. The kinesin is a molecular motor that transports organic along a microtubule and have a cell. And the size of the kinesin molecule just defined was 10 nanometer, but we can see the movement of such a small molecules by using our technique. So you can see a white spot indicate the single kinesin molecules. The size of just 5 nanometer, but we can directly observe the movement of the water proteins. and the other time at the single molecule level. This is probably the first movie we observed single protein molecule at work. And the next I will show you the other type of molecule called the myosin, not the muscle myosin. This myosin also transports organic RNA active filament in the nerve cell. And the size is also 10 or 20 nanometer. And red line indicates the active filament, and the blue spot indicates the individual single myosin molecule. So anyway, we can see the movement of single myosin molecule quite easily now. As far as we use the optical microscope, the spatial resolution is limited by the wavelengths of the visual light. So spatial resolution is just at most 200 nanometer. But by using the computer imaging analysis, we can determine the center of the fluorescent spot with nanometer accuracy. Furthermore, if we use the quantum dot, which emits the stronger fluorescence instead of fluorescent dye, we can determine the movement of this quantum dot with nanometer and millisecond spatial temporal resolution. So this is the myosin 5. Myosin 5 has a two-headed structure, as shown here. And then we attach the quantum dot to either head of each head. And then we observe the movement of the quantum dot with a nanometer and a millisecond spatial temporal resolution. This one. This is the movement of the quantum dot attached to the head of the myosin 5. And this trace indicates that a movement of the quantum dot attached to the one head of the two heads of the myosin 5. As you see, that the movement is not smooth but stepwise. The size of the step is 72 nanometers. 72 nanometer is the size of the active helical pitch. So this result indicates that the myosin 5 move along active helical pitch in hand over hand. This is not really our original result, but anyway, our result also clearly show that myosin 5 move along the active helical pitch by hand-over-hand mechanism. And of course, these movements are fueled by the chemical energy, moved by ATP hydrolysis. Next, we have applied our technique to directly observe individual ATP turnover events. For this purpose, we have synthesized the fluorescent ATP, 5,3 ATP, precisely fluorophore, attached to the ribose of the ATP. The myosin molecule interacts with this part of the ATP, so this ATP functions as well as normal ATP. This is the setup of the experiment. The size-3 ATP, fluorescent ATP, in bulk solution, of course, it does not emit fluorescence. When size-3 ATP goes into the evanescent field, size-3 ATP emits fluorescence. But due to very rapid Brownian motion in solution, size-3 ATP in solution does not make the fluorescent spot on the detector. just the background noise is increased. When the size-3 ATP bind to myosin molecule and stop the Brownian motion, it makes a clear fluorescent spot on the detector. So that's when dissociated from myosin molecule, fluorescent spot disappears. So by monitoring the flickering the fluorescent spot, we can directly follow the individual ATP turnover events or chemical reaction by single myosin molecule, a single enzyme in the real time. The upper trace indicates the myosin molecule labeled with GFP, fixed on glass surface. Then we apply the size-3 ATP to these myosin molecules. Then we observe the ATP turnover events by monitoring the flickering the fluorescent spots. So ATP turnover will take place like this. So by using such a simple method, we can directly follow individual chemical events now. And combining the single molecule imaging technique and for position determination and the ATP turnover event, we can simultaneously observe ATP turnover events and movement. And then the result is like this. ATP bind to the rear head, and the rear head dissociates from the actin filament. The rear head undergoes the Brownian motion, and then this head moves toward the forward actin target, and the desmyosin head moves along the actin filament. Okay, next, the single molecule nanomanipulation. In our field, we use the two methods, optical trapping nanometry and the scanning probe nanometry. Optical tweezer is a method to capture and manipulate small but dielectric particle by quantum pressure, as you know. Then by using this technique, we can capture and manipulate the small dielectric particle. So this shows that's DNA manipulation. These white spots indicate the captured dielectric particle, of which diameter is 1 micron or 0.2 microns. One end of the DNA attached to this piece, and the other end attached to another optical trap piece, and then the DNA can easily manipulate. Combining this method with the single molecule imaging, we can directly follow the process of the transcription of DNA information by RNA polymerase. The DNA molecule here, RNA molecule here, and we can follow the movement of the RNA polymerase. This shows that the movement of the single RNA polymerase of DNA. This shows the process of the search of the promoter position by the RNA polymerase. Now also the DNA molecule is a spherical structure. So the key question was whether the DNA molecule is rotated during the transcription. And the answer is the DNA molecule is rotated during transcription. This experiment was done by Harada-san, Hideshi Mekbari in 2005. And this shows the manipulation of the active filament. And this shows the single molecule mechanics, measurement of the single molecule mechanics by optical trapping nanometry. This is two ends of the active filament attached to optical trap piece, and the suspended actin filament was brought into contact with the single myosin molecule fixed on the artificial substrate, and then the individual mechanical event due to actin-myosin interaction in the presence of ATP were determined by measuring the displacement of this bead with nanometer accuracy. This is E. So this case is the many Bayesian molecule interact with actin, so the large displacement are taking place. But anyway, by using this method, we can determine the mechanical events at the single molecule level in real time. And this shows that time course of the displacement caused by a single Bayesian molecule. You can see the noisy that's in the side of the displacement, the 10 or 20 nanometer, the force is 1 picometer. Okay, now I stop the explanation of the single molecule detection techniques, and then I move to the study of how biological molecular machine work. We have studied the active myosin motor working in muscle. And this is because the important functions of the protein, such as enzyme reaction, energy transduction, molecular recognition, cellular assembly, are integrated in the molecular motor. So active myosin motor is the minimum functional unit of muscle. As I mentioned, the size of active myosin motor is just 10 to 20 nanometers, something like that. And such a small molecular machine was reconstructed under an optical microscope, and then we observed the mechanical and chemical reaction was simultaneously measured. And again, the two ends of the active filament are attached to optical trapeze, and the suspended actin filament was brought into contact with single myosin molecule or single myosin head fixed on the glass surface, and individual mechanical events was determined by measuring the displacement of this bead with nanometer accuracy. And individual ATP turnover event was measured by using sensory ATP and the single molecule detection technique. The upper trace indicates the time course of the mechanical displacement. Lower trace indicates ATP turnover event. And here, the ATP binds to myosin molecule. The myosin molecule dissociates from actin filament. Then force are returned to zero level, you see. And then myosin molecule with ADP PI bound, rebind to actin filament and generate the displacement, as you see. And this result indicates that each ATP turnover event corresponds to each displacement. And the next, we tried to resolve the process of the displacement. But this displacement takes place very rapidly, within 1 millisecond. So it was impossible to resolve the process of this displacement by using the optical trapping method. So we tried to observe the process of displacement slowed by attaching the head to large scanning probe, like this, and a huge probe attached to the small mesh head, and then the movement of this myosin head was slowed, greatly slowed, and then we observed the process. This shows the setup, and this panel indicates the image of the bright field image of the scanning probe, the tip of the scanning probe here. And then we switch for fluorescence observation. And the white spot indicates a single myosin molecule. This case, this single myosin head was captured by the tip of this kind of by just the handmade scanners. To capture this single machine, in order to, it takes maybe 2 or 3 years training to see and capture this single machine molecule. So, but anyway, and then the captured machine head was brought into contact with the active filament, and then the movement of the machine head was determined by measuring the displacement of this scanning flow with amateur accuracy. And this upper trace indicates the time course of the displacement. And the lower traces indicate the rising phase on an expanded time scale. As you see, the displacement does not take place abruptly, but instead developed in a stepwise fashion. And the size of the step was about 5.5 nanometer, very regular. And the number of the step bar displacement stochastically changed from 1 to 6 or something. And also, sometimes the machine head made a mistake, undergoes backward step. And the important point is that each displacement corresponds to 1 ADPS cycle. So these substep, 5.5 nanometer substep, are not directly coupled to ATP turnover events. So this result strongly suggests that machine molecule move by Brownian motion. The 5.5 nanometer coincide with the distance between adjacent actin monomers. So this result indicates that the machine had work on actin monomers by Brownian motion. Then you get afraid that Brownian motion is sufficient to produce the Hooke contraction. And by very simple calculation, the Brownian motion is sufficient to produce the movement and force of the machine molecule. But the Brownian motion is random, so that the Brownian motion must be biased in one direction. The next question is how the Brownian motion is biased. And first, we determine the bias potential energy. We measure the substep at various low. You see, at low load, this one high load like this, and the step size, 5.5 nanometer step, is unchanged, independent of the load. But the dwell time, so the dwell time is here. And the number of the backward step here increase at higher loads. From the number ratio of forward and backward step, we can determine the bias potential energy by using this equation. And what red spot indicate the forward backward step number ratio at various loads. Anyway, by using this data, we can determine the bias potential energy. That is the difference of the 2.5 kT. So bias potential energy is 2.5 kT per 5.5 nanometer substep. And the several or 2 or 3 substeps take place per displacement. So the bias potential energy is about 10 kT per displacement. So what single ATP molecule used to cause that single displacement, and the free energy of ATP is the 20 kT. So this value is half of the delta G ATP. So efficiency is 50%. That is so this result is that machine had work on active monomers according to potential slope, along actin helix by Brownian motion, and the potential slope is like this. The next problem is how is the potential slope generated. So that we have proposed a static effect based on the compatibility between the orientation of myosin head actin binding. It's a very simple one. Actin filament has a helical structure. So for example, this part is favorable for binding of the myosin molecule. But this part is difficult, but easy. Here is easy, but difficult for binding. So such a static effect or compatibility should make a potential slope. Here is the potential high and low. Very simple. And recently, Takano-san, Waseda University has confirmed this point by using the molecular dynamics, computer simulation by using computer molecular dynamics. So probably reasonable. But there are large body of evidence for conformational change of neck region of this part of the myosin head. And based on these studies, the Ibarra tilting model has been proposed, and this model has been widely accepted especially in Western countries. And according to this model, this large conformational change is directly coupled to the movement of the myosin molecule. So anyway, this tilting motion causes the movement. That's all. But in our model, the neck domain acts as a strain-dependent gate for controlling the timing of the start and the stop of the movement coupled to the ATPase reaction. And the tilting of the neck domain may contribute to isometric force. So I think that a large part of the movement is caused by biased Brownian motion, and this is the final. The rebound action is important for just the final reaction when the switching the sensor and so on. Also, I have probably no time to give you a detailed explanation of the movement of the myosin 5, not muscle 5. That's transport organic element. And then, anyway, the result is like this. As I show you that HB bind to myosin head, myosin dissociated from actin filament, and the dissociated myosin head undergoes biased Brownian motion, and then this head moves toward the forward acting target. So this movement is biased by potential slope by actin filament. That's very consistent. And also the kinesin. Kinesin also has a two head, and kinesin head that move along the microtube by hand over hand mechanism, like a myosin 5. And then recently we have demonstrated that the forward backward step is biased by entropy difference. So anyway, this result also strongly suggests that the kinesin molecule moved by Brownian nurtured mechanism. And not only the molecular model, but also the other molecular machine, some nurtured model may play a very important role. For example, the very famous study by Toshio on calcium pump. And he argued that the calcium pump transports the calcium ion by Brownian jet mechanism. The calcium is transported by rectified Brownian motion of large domain, this one. this large rotational motion, this motion of this domain is responsible for calcium transport, and this large rotational motion is the Brownian motion, and this Brownian motion is rectified by some switch mechanism. The ATP, chemical energy, is just used to switch this rotational motion. So the essential or the base mechanism is the same as that of the molecular motors. You may be afraid that the efficiency of energy conversion by such a molecular machine may be very small, but actually the efficiency is very high. So conclusion, with the unique operation of the molecular motor, the molecular motor does not overcome, but rather use Brownian motion. The origin of the movement is Brownian motion. The chemical energy from ATP is just used to bias or rectify the Brownian motion in one direction. Therefore, the maximum efficiency of energy conversion is more than 50%, even at the energy level as small as 1 of noise. So biological molecular machine uses the Brownian motion, thermal noise. Therefore, the molecular machine can thus operate at energy as low as thermal noise with high efficiency of energy conversion. And this is very good. But the operations are stochastic and ambiguous. This nature is a negative factor for man-made machine. But probably this nature is also advantageous for adaptivity or flexibility of the biological system. Maybe this is a key point. Maybe this is what is life. So to confirm this point, we have performed the computer simulation of cooperative action between the machine motors undergoing stochastic Brownian step based on the Langemann equation, very simple equation. Calculation takes a long time, but anyway, we have done. And then we observed that when the stochastic or the ambiguous molecular motor assembled to form the system, the system showed various dynamics. This is oscillation and modulation of the force and the velocity of the movement depend on the external condition. So anyway, we found that this system, that means the assemble of the stochastic or ambiguous element, showed very interesting dynamics. So this system shows various dynamics, oscillation, and this system can easily modulate the velocity of the force depending on the condition. So this concept can be used for developing the artificial muscle. So based on this concept, we are trying to develop the artificial muscle, collaborate with a huge big company, and the cell suction. This is a present robot. This robot is far from the human being. So this is because we have no good actuator that operates like muscle. Most of the present robot is moved by electric motor or piston. So movement is the variety of the movement of the robot is greatly limited. But if we will be able to develop a new actuator that operates like muscle, we can make a much more wonderful robot. at the present, we control the deterministic device like a motor by using a large-scale control to produce the various actions or reactions. But our concept is that by using a very simple control, we control the artificial muscle order system, which consists of the stochastic ambiguous element and to produce a flexible action. So anyway, the company also are very interested in our proposal. So maybe in the near future, we want to develop a new artificial muscle, and we want to make a huge money. And I have a time.
Yes.
When
20 minutes, including discussion.
Including 2 minutes.
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Including discussion.
Okay, just 5 minutes. This is the model of the scissor piston lemon. And do you know how much is the energy required for processing 1 bit of data by electric computer? Do you know? 1 bit, just 0, 1. To perceive the 0, 1 two state, how much energy is required?
Microwatt?
Micro to just give or absolute value. So 1 watt. No, not 1 watt. The KT, how many?
Log 2 kT.
What?
Log 2 kT.
Log?
Log.
Log. Okay, I will show you that 20 million kT per bit. So that the computer uses a huge energy for the function. But according to the scissor piston lemon model, if the Brownian motion is used, that energy is just 0.7 kT per bit. Of course, the mechanism is essentially different, so we can simply compare these values. But this argument suggests that if we use the Brownian motion, the fluctuation, we can economize the energy in the computer system. So finally, I would like to briefly talk about the picture-stereo cell signaling. The sum of noise is positive force signal processing in cells. Not in this case, we applied electric field with galvanic axis. We apply the electric field. And the amoeba, the picture-stereo amoeba, move towards the castle. You see, the gradient is very small, so that the movement of the amoeba is not smooth but fluctuating. But on the average, the amoeba move towards the castle. Okay, then we apply the noise. And then what happened? And then before applying the noise, please remember. And then we apply the noise. You can see the difference. No noise. In the presence of noise. Anyway, probably you can see the difference. So this shows that the velocity of the towards the castle with without noise. As you see, in the presence of the noise, the velocity towards the castle is 3 times larger. So the noise. This result suggests that the noise is useful for galvanic axis. Noise play a positive role in processing of the cell signaling. just a suggestion. So of course, the self-signaling is processed by the very complicated molecular network in the cell, as mentioned by previous speaker. And recently, we can directly observe the molecular network dynamics in the cell and at the single molecule level directly by using our technique, single molecule imaging technique. And then we are trying to observe the molecular network dynamics coupled to the galvan attacks at the single molecule level. Anyway, just I quite briefly introduce you our recent result. This shows that the binding of cyclic AMP to the receptor. White spot indicates the cyclic AMP. So next is the G alpha. The G beta here. This is IPC kinase. This is the P10. Anyway, now we have followed most of the old proteins involved in this molecular circuit, signaling circuit. So in the near future, we will give a clear answer how the molecular circuit use some of the noise for their processing. It's a solid E. We have not yet the clear answer about that. Anyway, the company are also very interested in our result, and we are trying to develop a processor which does not avoid the effect of the sound of noise, rather accept the sound of noise. And then, anyway, at a very preliminary stage, but this processor can simulate the behavior of the amoeba like this. In the near future, we will be able to develop the new processor which does not shut down, but accept the sound of noise, the economic and the flexible processors. And finally, maybe 2 minutes, the dynamic visual perception. The fluctuation also play an essential role in the flexible visual perception by human brain. And this will be presented by Watson tomorrow, so I will show you it quite briefly. This is the very famous picture by Dali. The name is The Image Disappears. This is a perception, ambiguous figure. This is a really ambiguous figure. If this is hair, this is the nose, then you see the man. But if this part is head and the shoulder and arm, then you see the baby, right? At least there are two interpretations. This is ambiguous figures. And then in such in the perception of such an ambiguous figure, the consciousness is switched to man and lady. And we are studying that process, switching process. And we found that the consciousness switch is caused by the spontaneous fluctuation. And this is the hidden figure perception. Due to the lack of information, you can not perceive this figure immediately, but if you watch for a while, you will notice what is that. I do not show the answer. Maybe Murata-san will show the answer tomorrow. And then he showed that this process is very essentially the same as that of enzymatic reaction. Of course, enzymatic reaction is promoted but driven by thermal fluctuation. So this result suggests that the consciousness or perception of the brain is also driven by thermal fluctuation or some fluctuation. So fluctuation play an important role in the flexible visual perception by human brain. And what is the difference between biological man-made machines? The answer is biological machine utilize fluctuation for economizing energy, and the resulting stochastic operation are used for flexible function. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for interesting talk. Now the session is open for questions, comments, or discussion. Yeah, please.
I didn't quite well understand what that noise is that you add. How do you add the noise, and what sort of noise is it? It's thermal, temperature?
To what?
You,
Yes, noise. But
oh, yes, you add something.
In case of the molecular water, just we measure the movement at the room temperature.
Yes.
Just the Brownian motion of the maybe water
Room
molecule.
temperature, 20 degrees something, yes? And then you add?
Next to the amoeba movement, amoeba.
The amoeba, yeah.
And at that time we applied, that is the galvanotaxis, we applied the noise, electric noise.
Electric noise.
Yes, in the case of the brain, we cannot apply the noise. So that we want to, if you have a good idea, we want to apply the noise to the human brain, and if the perception efficiency is increased, that's great.
But that noise that you add to these small amoebas
Yeah, amoeba.
is electric. It's some sort of an electrical impulse that is regular or something, or?
So any noise affects the efficiency of galvanotaxis, but the with some special, maybe 2 kilohertz sinusoidal electric field is most efficient.
Okay, so it's a little electrical
Yeah.
something same.
So that the amoeba has some tuning system.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, please.
So over here, Dave Dealer, you had about 2 millivolts per 10 microns imposed on the amoeba, is that correct? So that's approximately 20 volts per centimeter that were put across it, just approximately. Then you must have put in a random noise of about plus or minus 10 millivolts per centimeter. So that's the perspective that might help explain that question. But it was put in randomly. It wasn't any sort of oscillating wave. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's the membrane potential is maybe 40 millivolt in case of the amoeba. And then the 2 volts per centimeter correspond to the maybe 40 or not exact, but 10 millivolt per something per membrane.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the also the yes.
Yeah, just a point here, and that is that voltage falls across the insulating barrier of the membrane,
Yes.
which is only 5 nanometers.
Right.
So it's really quite a large field in terms of electrical field across that. Even a couple of millivolts would be a huge electrical field across the insulator.
Electric field is very
Yes.
huge.
That's right.
Yeah.
Probably tens of thousands of volts per centimeter.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, one other question. Calcium is used to activate the active myosin reaction in muscle tissue.
Yeah.
Are kinesin and dynein also under some regulatory mechanism like calcium, or are they just on all the time?
That is still the controversial. So that's probably the phosphorylation is related to the regulation of the movement of the kinase molecule. So that some kinase, the calcium activated some kinase, and the kinase activated kinase phosphorylated the kinase molecule, and the phosphorylated kinase molecule is activated, dephosphorylated. But I think that regulation is not so deterministic or clear, just like muscle. In case of the muscle, is very on-off.
Yeah.
In the presence of external noise, biological machine seems to be more effective. Is it possible for a biological machine to distinguish between internal noise and external noise? If it is possible, it can be the first step to be becoming some complex.
Yeah, that is the essential point. As I mentioned that in the brain uses 20 watts. But when we think something, the additional energy jump just 0.5 watt or something, so that more than 90% the energy is used to just cause the spontaneous fluctuation. Have you measured this activity of the muscle? Just noise. And then we think just the additional fluctuation intensity increases very slow. And also when we observe the movement or the dynamics of the cellular protein in the cell, they undergo very strong fluctuations, even in the rest state. When we apply something, that movement not essentially different from that at the resting state. So you said, so it's difficult. Why? Probably in the biological system, the spontaneous fluctuation is essential for their function. In case of the muscle, the water molecule causes the fluctuation, that Brownian motion. But the higher level, the cell level, brain level, the Brownian motion energy is not sufficient to cause the fluctuation. So that by using the energy, the system make a fluctuation. I feel. So, yeah.
I have another question. In relation to the previous talk given by Alex, he said that microtube has some dynamic instability based on chaotic motion. You mentioned here about Brownian motion of a single molecule. Is there any connection or is there any contradiction between them?
No contradiction. That is also the instability of the thread milling or elongation of the shrinking of the microtube is caused by probably some fluctuation. So that instability is responsible for the movement of the cell making the cell shape or the spindle movement. So that is, but in our case, I focus on that movement of the myosin actin. So that I think that's the essential principle of the myosin kinesin movement and the microtubule actin instability is the same.
Yes.
Similar question from Salford and with the first question of Rase. And you said that in the experiment of Ameller, you added 2 kHz noise. Why did you choose 2 kHz in the experiment?
No, just we survey the whole frequency, and then we found that 2 kHz is not exactly. I do not remember exactly, but maybe 2 kHz. 2 kHz is the most
Optimal.
So that I don't know why.
Yeah, because the stochastic nature of the cell is, I think, very important, and similar with the question from Salford. And you said that the system of cells sometimes obeys larger type phenomena, and from the experiment of microwave into for example brain or cells, we can observe the phenomena that some intermittency enhance the effect. For example, in case of microwave, if we have modulation, we can observe a very effective effect, and maybe Salford knows well. And also in case of larger system, we have several time scales characteristic time scale. So we can easily expect that we have optimal frequency or optimal noise. And with this noise, we can find several internal time scales or physical scales. So
yeah, but so the I agree with you that the unfortunately now we don't know the watch mechanism operating cell signaling now. Maybe the 2 kilohertz is the maximum. Maybe some system the characteristic.
yeah.
Yes, characteristic frequency for example, some larger is 2 kilohertz.
And the dependence of the frequency is very is resonant, right, or broad, or broad. So not so specific.
Not specific.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. Now the other question. Yeah, here.
Thank you very much for the interesting talk. So you made a comparison between the brain as a stochastic computation and the computer as a deterministic computation. I'd like to know the example of what computation is possible for stochastic system, but is impossible for deterministic computation.
So anyway, the calculation, the silicon science is much better. The present computer is much powerful for the calculation and the data treatment, but it's very poor at the processing the ambiguous information. So that the
So what do you mean by ambiguous information?
for example, the ambiguous figure, as I showed, the computer cannot provide the answer, but we can easily show this is a man or lady. Or we show that the hidden figure we can imagine, and then we can show also the language. We read the news of long newspaper, we can make abstract quite easily. But the computer, difficult. So that's the inspiration, maybe that's the word of inspiration. Also, the robotics people, to make to control the something like that, and we can easily capture this one and manipulate. And we think that this action is very easy action. That's the for computer scientists, it's very difficult. So that's the probably brain does not work so hard for this action. Just they send a simple pulse, but the hand can manipulate like this. So this is probably so anyway, ambiguous or unexpected information computer cannot use for to meet with such an unexpected or ambiguous event, but the man biological system can easily treat with the unexpected. So maybe that's a fluctuation play very important role. So we want to make such kind of process.
So nature is full of uncertainty, so probably the biological system has evolved the stochastic computational unit to deal with such uncertainty. Is this correct?
Yeah. Just a stochastic and noise. And some people stochastic people neglect the noise, but it's stochastic, including the noise.
Now the last question, please.
I just have a question, the connection to the question and your answer. In the brain system, yes, of course, we have a kind of a potential in which we can distinguish or sense the difference. However, our brain system always, experiences many experiences, and beside, in addition, because of the experiences which are accumulated in memory system. By memory system, we have a potential of the distinguishing a new, unexpected thing to be understood in orderly way. Now, of course, in computer system, we should have a program first. By program, they can distinguish. So this is, of course, clear difference. But in our system, we have a memory, experience, based upon experience. This is quite different.
Yeah, but anyway, if we discuss this point, it takes a huge time. But anyway, as I mentioned that I believe I specialized in electronics, a computer before. And then I said, as I mentioned, the capacity, memory capacity of the brain is very poor. And probably what shall I say, the performance of the brain is not wonderful. But it's very poor compared with the computer. The mysterious thing is that still our brain can make a computer. So that is a mystery. So that I want to make that point clear.
Sorry for making my question finally. Well, my question is quite a generic one. From a conservative physical point of view, you know, existence of demons was denied during the contraction of the status quo mechanics. So, the demons cannot behave as machine, consuming such a small amount of energy compared with KT. So it is said that demons also fall into fluctuations, thermal fluctuations with such a small energy. So what is your opinion about such a conservative physical point of view?
But not KT, we apply a little bit larger energy than the KT.
But you have mentioned that 1.7 KT is enough for closing a shutter or so in last line. So that point that...
Also, as I mentioned, that in case of the muscle, myosin, the 2.5 kT is sufficient to produce the muscle contraction. So that anyway, the energy level, input energy level of our system is not far from thermal noise energy.
Okay, now thank you very much again.